Welcome to the MSDW Podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com, and this is episode 3 of our Upgrade Journey series, where I and Peter Jekyll of Turn On Dynamics look at the key issues and considerations of moving from Dynamics AX to Dynamics 365 for finance and operations. And this episode is really where the series starts to get interesting, because we are joined by Kenny Mullican, the CIO of Paragon Films, a plastic manufacturer running AX 2012 R2, a system that is now close to its end of support. That means a D365 upgrade is likely to be in their future. With a successful AX system working for the company today, Kenny says the company understands the implications of moving, but as we discuss in the episode, he still has a lot of questions to answer before moving ahead with an upgrade, not least of which is whether the cloud is right for a manufacturer with the financial and operational demands that his company faces. All right, we are back for another episode of the Dynamics AX to Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations Upgrade Journeys podcast series, and I'm joined today by Kenny Mullican of Paragon Films. Kenny, hey, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And once again with us is Peter Jekyll from Turn On Dynamics. Peter, hello.
Jason, good as always. Kenny, thanks for being on with us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. It's good to talk to you.
Yeah, and I really do want to start by also thanking you, Kenny, for joining, and hopefully just getting a little more background about who you are and why we were lucky enough to have you join today. So you are CIO at Paragon Films, a Dynamics AX customer. Can you tell us a little bit more about what your company has done, maybe a little about your background as well?
Sure. So Paragon Films is a plastics manufacturer in the packaging industry. We make stretch film, which is kind of like Glad cling wrap, big rolls of plastic that they use to wrap boxes on pallets for shipping. And there's hand wrap where you can walk around the boxes, and then machine wrap where they drive a pallet with a front end loader and wrap boxes with a big machine. And we sell about 150, 200 million pounds a year of this plastic wrap they call stretch film. We became AX 2012 R2 customers about 4 years ago. We did an implementation of AX 2012 R2, and it's been running pretty much all aspects of our business, from the accounting side, sales, production planning, shipping, logistics, the works. It's all there in AX, and we've it's really worked out well for us.
And as I understand it, it's an implementation that goes across multiple sites, right? You're based in Oklahoma.
That's right. Our corporate headquarters and our original plant is in Oklahoma, and then we have a plant in Washington State and one in North Carolina.
All right, great. So really a sort of a almost a prototypical or really ideal kind of a scenario for what AX 2012 was really meant for. A lot of sort of complex processes and lots of different elements of the business using it. And can you tell us a little bit more about the original implementation? It was about 4 years ago. Can you give us kind of scope of size of it and anything like that?
Sure. So we end up with about a little under 100 total users of the system. And the original implementation took about 15 months from start to finish. We were migrating from a legacy system that had been in place for many years at the company and moved on to AX 2012. It was the implementation partner had brought a team on site. They pretty much came on site every week with 3 or 4 consultants and a project manager, and worked with us to define, exactly what all of our processes were, how those mapped into AX, and then guided us through the process of defining the workflows and making sure that as they were implemented, we understood it and put it in. We were the ones to put it in place with their assistance, and and then after the fact, we would be able to maintain it and operate it with their assistance, but we wouldn't be dependent on them as for ongoing operations.
All right. And to bring Peter into this, so Peter, you know Kenny from from your own writing on your blog, and you've sort of connected through what AXUG sort of chapter meetings.
Yeah, we had he attended one of the chapter meetings where I had a presentation, and I think I mentioned somewhere during my presentation that my background in real sweet spot as far as what I enjoy working with is manufacturing firms. And so I think at one of the breaks, he came up and said hi, and we started talking about our experience with manufacturing and AX. And since then, we've kind of communicated back and forth. He checks out some of my industry writings and sets me on the straight and narrow when I'm too far in left field. And it's a lot of fun for me because Kenny's kind of an interesting guy. He's the IT guy, quote unquote IT guy, but he knows more about business and accounting than a lot of folks that I meet that are in those functions. So he's got this broad overview of everything that's happening, not only on the shop floor, but in the, the development side as well as on the business side. So he's just a really great resource to bounce stuff off of.
For sure.
Yeah, and Peter, I really like working with Peter because he's got a lot of experience in manufacturing. So I've only been CIO at this company for about 6 years, and prior to that, I hadn't been in any manufacturing companies. So I've picked up a lot of how we do things, but what I haven't had a lot of experience in is how do other people do things, especially when it comes to manufacturing and how does an ERP system do manufacturing. So Peter's been a great resource to be able to bounce things off of about, how can we get more out of the ERP system for our manufacturing and our operations.
Do you still feel like there's room to improve the usage of the system that you have now?
Oh, absolutely. I think, one of the things is when you're doing your initial implementation, you can't shoot for the moon. You can't try to get everything in there or it would never be finished. And so we had to make choices at certain times to be able to say, what is the minimum viable product? What do we have to have in place in order to keep the business running? And then what are those areas where they could be maybe put off for a phase 2 or for a refinement once we get everything in place. And so that worked out perfectly for us because we were able to transition very quickly into the new system and get a chance to use it for a while before we had to make a lot of those choices. And so over the past few years, we have refined our processes. We've put some customizations in place that allow AX to help those processes be more efficient and help us to increase our output. But there's always room for more. There's always, I think, a chance to automate more things or a chance to use more artificial intelligence where the system can help you do your planning or your forecasting, a few of those things that I believe there's always going to be more that we could get out of it.
Mm-hmm. I guess that would also extend to does that extend to the data that you're collecting? When I think of AI, I also think there's sort of a volume of good data you need underpinning that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's where we've probably only begun to tap into is off the manufacturing lines. There is unlimited amount of data that could help us to make decisions, and we're just getting started in capturing that and integrating it into the data that's part of the ERP system in order to be able to analyze and use that. But Microsoft Power BI is what we've gone with to help us bring all that together and do the analysis, reporting, and a lot of visualization.
And maybe this is a segue into kind of the theme of what Peter and I have been talking about in the course of a few different discussions that we've had, and that's sort of looking to the future. When you think about sort of improvements to come, is that upgrade from AX to finance and operations sort of looming for you right now, or Are you looking down the road to it?
We're looking down the road to it.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like it's got to happen at some point. I don't want to be responsible for trying to keep a system going beyond its expiration date. Kudos to companies that can still, that are still using the system they put in place in 1988. But there's so many new advancements that come along that you want to be able to keep up with it. There's security enhancements and patches and things that you want to stay on top of. And there's new technologies that come out and new integrations that are there. So we know we're going to need to upgrade at some point. Also, the move to the cloud is inevitable. We know we'll have to get there sometime. But there are two areas that have made it a little more daunting for us. One is that Microsoft has been a little bit slow to bring some of the functionality that was already there in 2012 into Dynamics 365. There are some things that we count on as an integral part of the way we do business that we just have to have it, and so far it isn't in it. We have found out by keeping on top of the new release notes that probably within the next few months to a year, some of those features are getting added and probably will take care of what we need. But that's been one reason that we haven't been more on top of. We need to upgrade now. The other is that just not knowing how much is it really going to take. When we implemented, we insisted that we wanted to do things by the book, that we wanted to do things the Microsoft way. So we weren't going to go in there and try to turn AX on its head and make it do things it wasn't intended to do. We wanted to find out what's the AX way, and if we were to customize in order to support needs of the business, especially things that are controlled by our industry, where we can't change the way our industry works, but we have to make AX perform that function. We wanted to stay within the framework that was provided and do upgradable customizations. And so all through the implementation, and then ever since then, in the years that we've done any additional customizations, we've tried to make sure that we did them by the book where they would be upgradable. Now, does that translate into a smooth upgrade into Dynamics 365? We don't know. There's a big difference between putting a CU, a cumulative update, in place that only has some files to be merged, and possibly some ways that they've changed the framework or changed the way things are done. And so we don't know which of the customizations that we've done are upgradable or would have to be started over, or which of the third-party add-ons that we've gotten have an equivalent edition for Dynamics 365, and which ones of those maybe we'd have to find a new partner for. So there's a lot of unknowns there that would be part of the, what's the implementation going to take? How big of a project is it? How much will it cost? Is it really an upgrade, or is it almost like a new implementation?
Hey, Jason, do you remember the other day you and I were talking that you had, were speaking to someone that was writing about the automated upgrade tools?
Yeah.
And how that was going to speed and lower costs in this?
Right.
Well, I had a really good laugh about that at the time, because I immediately thought about Kenny and his implementation and the real world, where something is what I would consider an actual enterprise type of upgrade. And it would be real interesting to see trying to apply those quote unquote automated upgrade tools against an implementation like Kenny has. I think the results would be highly entertaining.
Well, it sounds like, Kenny, you're ready to sort of spend, I don't know what, at least this year, investigating, trying to put those pieces together. You're not in a huge rush yet to move, and you have lots of questions you seem to want answered.
Right, exactly. We want to take the time to understand what it's going to take, get some idea of what it might cost,
yeah.
And then other things too, like that are maybe looming out there, are when will Microsoft actually stop supporting it? Currently, for 2012 R2, I believe they've set a date of October 2021 as the end of extended support. But will they extend extended support, or will they really stop it that quickly? might make a difference as to when we need to do that next project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's certainly people out there who think that could get pushed back. Certainly doesn't sound out of the realm of possibility to me, but yeah, I haven't heard anything on that point yet. And I think Microsoft's done that kind of thing before. And although I'd have to go back and I don't know. Do you know of any times when Microsoft's ever pushed back end of support?
Well, I think the entire move through the D365 has had multiple shifting dates, right? And it's one thing, with have this great plan on how things roll out, and then reality hits you from a standpoint of technical challenge you didn't think of, adoption rates you didn't think of, the ability of consultants to actually go out and be able to deliver, right? So to me, a lot of those dates are, this is when we would like to get done, but I think these, there are so many moving parts involved here and things are so complex that I think everything is open to change. For example, think about this. Think about the economics. If you're looking at some of the costs to upgrade that I've seen for a decent sized enterprise implementation, there may simply be an entire universe of customers that cannot afford the upgrade cost. They might be excited about the monthly, cost that they could pay to be in the cloud, but they literally cannot afford to upgrade. What do you do if a large portion of your customer base fits into that bucket? So I think there are a ton of things that happen in the real world that affect what folks that have that ideal timeline laid out affect that.
So I guess the other for Peter, the other thing that occurs to me is you have begun this journey and gone down it with other companies, upgrading from AX to finance and operations. How much do those experiences, the path that they've followed, how much do those things how much can you use those experiences to predict for another company like Paragon Films or someone else, how successful they'll be? Is it replicable?
Well, every upgrade is going to be different, right?
Yeah.
But the core of all these upgrades really revolves around objects. And objects, there are different types of objects that sit underneath your AX implementation, and the ability to upgrade those objects, that's the biggest single most complex part of the upgrade. Now, there are different types of objects and there are different numbers of the different types, and objects within groups are different. So the trick is that you have to be able to figure out how many of these different types of objects exist in your implementation. And then not only that, but what's the level of complexity within each object? Now, a manual task to take a look at that would be, it's similar to almost doing the upgrade, right? So doing that, it's one of those things is you actually don't know what the time and cost is until you do it, which is kind of, defeats the purpose. So what we have found, the only way that we can accurately upgrade that is we've developed programs that go inside and interrogate those objects and come back with level of complexity and then give us, an idea of the level of effort involved. But what we're finding is that right now AX and, the D365 is so successful that folks are out there and there's a lot of emphasis on selling new systems and implementing new systems. And so as a result of that, the upgrade market is, to a large extent, an afterthought. Microsoft is much happier with you when you sell a brand new system and install it rather than, upgrading your install base. And so what we're finding is that because of that success of the product line, you get folks that come in, for quotes that are, people have gotten quotes that they send to me and say, hey, we got this quote. Does this look reasonable to you? And, it's one page of a spreadsheet with a couple of numbers on it, and the number is huge, right? And in some cases, the number is, as much as an implementation or 1.5 times an initial implementation. And so people are staggered by that. And where is that quote coming from, right? that quote's coming from, what people have taken to do a similar, project before. So it's really interesting because, like I said, the expense has been a big shock for folks, for actual projects, that are quoted and delivered, and for just, quotes that people are given that are, taking a look to see if they want to do it.
Kenny, is that kind of investigation that Peter talked about? Is that what you're thinking about too, or are you focused on other questions?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just what he was talking about has been my experience exactly. You can come across implementation partners that are willing to sort of say, oh, well, our experience says that company your size, you're probably looking at about X, and we're just taken aback because you think, wow, why should it be anywhere from 1.5 to 2 times the cost of our original implementation? What makes that even an upgrade? Is it just that it's not any easier to go to D365 from AX 2012 than if we were going from, Oracle or NetSuite or something like that? Because if the upgrade is so expensive, then it doesn't really seem like an upgrade at all. So, I don't know. I really like the idea that there are some tools that could be used to help at least gauge the scope of how customized are we, how complicated would it be. That might give some idea of what it is, because it's true what Peter was saying. You can't give a really accurate estimate until you've really done the work itself, and that's the same thing we ran into in our original implementation. And luckily, our ERP implementation partner was willing to sit down and say, well, there's a few different ways that we could do the pricing. The price estimate here. One is that we could do a whole separate project that would probably take 6 months, where we would go through and understand your needs so well that we could estimate to a high degree of confidence what the end project is going to cost. But you'd already be in for quite a bit of cost just for that initial project. The other is that we could just take a guess at it and give a number that's so big that it would absorb whatever might possibly happen in there. Or the third one, which is what we ended up going with, which was we can give you an estimate on what it might cost to do essentially a vanilla implementation that doesn't have a lot of customization. And then as we get into the project and determine that there are certain things that aren't as we thought, then we do change orders. And there were a lot of change orders, and it ended up making the final cost be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 times what the original estimate was. Luckily, I had a CEO that was okay with that. He'd done enough projects building manufacturing facilities or building homes or whatever that the same thing happened, that I didn't lose my job over it. But, that's sometimes the way that you have to do it. You have to get into the project before you really know what it's going to take. So that's, again, I think going to be the challenge on an upgrade, is how much work do you have to do up front to find out what it's going to take, so that you get some ballpark of what you're looking at.
And one of the interesting things that I've found out on executing some of these upgrade projects is, you think that scope creep is normal on a new implementation, but that an upgrade project, the scope creep is fairly manageable. But the thing that I have found is that there's an incredible amount of scope creep on the upgrade projects because of things that, unless you've done these, you don't know and you don't think about ahead of time. And so I've come up with my, upgrade rule, my scope creep upgrade rule, which is that if you want to guarantee no scope creep on your upgrade project, don't upgrade.
It's really just in some case, in a certain way, Kenny, what you described is exactly what you hear all the time with big IT projects and so forth. It's just I still marvel that it just never it doesn't seem to get better. Those same challenges around price and scope creep just haven't subsided over the years. I think my perception, and Peter, you can tell me what you think, is that not a lot of existing AX customers have done upgrades yet. I think it's still very early days for the upgrade finance and operations projects. Like you said, so many of the ones that are live are new deals or sort of new implementations for maybe a customer that has AX, but they're putting finance and operations into one corner. And those have been the wins and the go lives, especially the smaller scale ones. So we're really getting into that era, I think, with 2019, 2020, where we will see and hear from, AX customers and telling Microsoft, telling us perhaps other users what they think about what they're finding. And so I think we're really kind of at the beginning of that era here.
Yeah, and I think it's going to take a while for people to actually pull the trigger to upgrade, because here's an interesting thing. Forget about the sticker shock, right? So after that, one of the biggest things I see is that people that are used to having a very friendly system to work in, where you have access to being able to do modifications, do integrations with legacy systems, third-party integrations, things of that nature, all of a sudden that entire dynamic is changing, because in order to run this stuff well in the cloud without there being, a 5-alarm fire every day at Microsoft, they have to more and more lock down the capability of, somebody like Kenny and his team to go in there and make changes, integrate things. And that is a completely different, that's a completely different mindset for people. Mm-hmm.
Sure,
Think about this for a second. AX was sold on the fact that look how easy it is to go in and make customizations, right? Look how easy it is to integrate this software and how well it maintains those modifications and customizations, right? That was one of the big selling points. And so I'm not an IT guy, right? But Kenny's a developer, and they write some cool code, and they've done some, custom applications. And everybody that's in his shoes, when they take a look at what this new architecture is and what the new rules are and, what they can touch and how easy it is, that's another whole ball game.
Well, I wanted to change topics just a little bit. There was another really interesting point that Kenny you had made as we were getting going here today, and that was really around your company's perspective on one of the things that Microsoft really puts out there as a benefit, and that's the idea of switching of going with finance and operations or going with other D365 products as SaaS, and having this great opportunity to switch from a CapEx model of expense to an OpEx model. And what you were telling us was that's not necessarily a selling point for every company. Can you talk a little bit more about how your company sort of looks at something like that with regard to IT expense?
Sure. Well, one of the first things that I can say is that when you already have the infrastructure, when you've already put the servers in place and you've already bought the equipment and you've already bought those licenses, then the thought that you're going to start paying a monthly fee on top of all of that is hard, because rather than getting to take advantage of something that you already bought with only just paying the annual support or maintenance in order to keep going with the newer versions, the monthly costs go up a lot. So that's the first thing. And then the other is just that like the way that our company judges its or makes decisions on how we're going to spend our money has to do with the way that we define the value of the company. We're owned by investors that are looking at our profitability as one of the most important factors. And so switching from capital expenses, which don't factor into their profitability model, to operating expenses that come right off the top and decrease the profitability makes it really hard to do that kind of a switch. So we can't automatically say that it's desirable to move CapEx spending into OpEx spending. For us, it might actually make the company less desirable for investors.
I certainly understand the point that you make and the perspective that the investors in your company would be coming from. But then on the other hand, I think, well, what if you look at the broad range of sort of ERP vendors out there, and how many of them really offer a great alternative for on-premise in their most recent software? I actually don't know. I can't think. I don't know the answer to that, but I wonder if any others today really play on the strength of their on-prem offering as a choice, a mechanism of choice. That would be an interesting question to answer.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, but I know that when the whole question first came up about on-prem, because initially Microsoft said they weren't going to do it. It was all just going to be in the cloud, and everybody had to move. And I remember going to some of the Microsoft conferences and getting in round tables with people who were in the manufacturing segment and talking to the Microsoft execs about it, and seeing how that thinking evolved when they got such pushback from people saying, now, wait a second, for instance, our company, our manufacturing lines run 24/7, 365. It's very expensive to shut them down and start them back up. So we keep them running all the time. We have people that are constantly producing products. And so we want to be connected to our systems that amount of time too. Now we can afford to have a little bit of downtime. If there's a little, a really brief outage, they can keep making product without being connected. But in general, we have to stay connected. And so to be completely reliant on our internet connection for that, or completely reliant on that the cloud provider isn't going to have an outage, or that there isn't going to be some interruption between us and that data center, is hard to swallow for a manufacturing company. And so the next thing that you saw was, well, we're going to let you put part of it. You can put part of it there in your on location so that you can still be connected to your work, to your shop floor and to the manufacturing lines, and then part of it will have to stay in the cloud. And I think that's where they've pretty much wound up, that there are some features that are just going to be in the cloud. They don't want to take the time to make them available. But at the same time, I wonder how many AX 2012 companies that are currently using it that are out there. There's got to be hundreds, if not thousands of them, and some of them quite large, that are all asking these same questions. They're saying also, when are we going to have to upgrade, and what's that going to look like for us? And rather than having a nice, where in the past it was 2012 to R2 to R3, it was doable as a fairly short project to just move into the next realm. Here they've made such a big jump that I wonder what that's going to look like. And hopefully there will be a few other companies that come before us that can give us a little more idea. This is not something that a company like ours is willing to be bleeding edge on.
I can certainly understand that. Well, Peter, anything else you want to add before we start wrapping up here?
I just think this is one of the better sessions we've had. It's just fantastic information. I just want to thank Kenny. You did a great job. I really thank you for taking the time out and helping us out here.
Sure, Peter, Jason, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, it really. I second Peter's point there. It's really great to hear from you, and we appreciate you sharing the experiences you've been through and what you're looking ahead to. It's really really valuable stuff for us, and I'm sure for our listeners too.
Yeah, I'm thinking you made it through the original implementation. Now you got to avoid getting fired over the upgrade.
It probably doesn't even feel that long ago, right?
It doesn't seem fair, does it?
It doesn't feel that long ago. Whenever I said it was 4 years ago, I thought, damn, really? 4 years?
I can only imagine, yeah. Well, we'll keep up to date on what the latest are. I think the next conference season kicks off in Europe in not too long, and we'll be hearing from there on out where Microsoft really stands on some of these things, important questions to consider for the future.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing more of the blog posts and podcasts.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kenny. This has been another episode of the MSDW Podcast. My thanks to Kenny Mullican of Paragon Films and Peter Jekyll of Turn On Dynamics for joining me today. If you have any feedback, please get in touch, jgumpert at msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World signing off.